Here is Chelsea's current squad. Oh yeah, and they also have 7 goalkeepers. Wait, actually, they have 8 goalkeepers. They also just signed a striker, a centre-back, and now Pedro Neto in the last 2 days. This is the current state of Chelsea's squad. What is going on? With the controversy of Roman Abramovich and his sudden departure from the club, from the purchase featuring a certain Todd Bowley, and the flurry of transfers that came afterwards, Chelsea this window has spent over 200 million euros, and most players that they've bought you cannot even name. Some players have not even played more than 10 games of senior football. For example, Argentine centre-back Aaron Anselmino, a Boca Juniors academy player, has only started 6 games of senior football, has just been bought for around £15 million. Now, I'm not a genius by any means, however, that seems incredibly risky. How about Gabriel Mek, a Brazilian wonder kid from Grêmio? Now, of course, it's always exciting to get a Brazilian wonder kid, a winger at best. However, how much football has he played? 6. And those are 6 under 20 games. He's not played a single game of senior football. According to Bruno Andrade, a Brazilian journalist, it will be around 24 million euros for a player that's not played a single minute of senior football. This is after having a ton of other players that are also wingers, such as Angelo, which they bought a year or so ago, Diego Moreira, Madueke, Mudryk, Raheem Sterling, Cole Palmer, and has just got Pedro Neto, who, by the way, has missed 100 games of football due to injury in the last 2 to 3 seasons, including as well the purchase of Estavio Willian from Brazil for 34 million euros. However, at least he's had a full season under his belt, playing competitive senior football and doing quite well. Still a risk, but makes some more sense considering he actually has played football consistently for at least a year. Chelsea Football Club in the last 2 seasons, despite spending over £1 billion, now it's way over £1 billion now, has finished 6th and then 12th. The vast majority of last season was in 9th place. However, they had a great end of the year under Pochettino, which was then sacked, which you would expect, okay, well, maybe there was a good manager to replace him. And they brought in a man in Enzo Maresca with no experience of being a manager in a top flight, is only second ever job ever in professional football. And even fans of Leicester City weren't really the biggest fans of him and found that he was really making a massive mess out of what should have been a very easy job. He had the best team in the Championship by literally a country mile. Now, could he be potentially a decent manager? Maybe, but again, it's a massive risk. Personally, I don't think he'll be there past Christmas. I see Maresca as a coach. I do not see him as a manager. And Chelsea, with all these players, they need a manager, a man manager, a master of creating a culture and developing so many young players within a club. I personally see the Chelsea job as an impossible task. On top of that, he's got no experience with a group, and I mean a massive group of players with no experience, with a board with no experience. The only substantial evidence that we could find of what their actual strategic plan is to try to be like Brighton and Hove Albion. That appears to be what the plan is. If you don't believe me, let me elaborate. Within the last 18 months, Chelsea have took 11 people from Brighton and Hove Albion. This includes Sam Jewell, the head of scouting, Graham Potter and the entire staff team that came with him from Brighton, Bruno Saltor, Ben Roberts, Billy Reid, Budjon Hamburg, Robert Sanchez, Mark Cucurella, Moses Caicedo, Kyle McCauley, recruitment analyst, and Paul Winstanley, who's now Chelsea's co-sporting director. Chelsea have given Brighton, at that point, £225 million. There is a reason why other clubs don't just simply buy out as many players as they can, young players that may show a glimmer of talent all the time. There's a reason for this, because it is incredibly risky. Now, I reached out on Twitter about what even is the plan. Can a Chelsea fan please lay me out what the plan is in actual simple layman terms? And I got a response here, which I think is valid. Shout out to Felix Johnston, a guy which I follow myself on Twitter and seems like a very reasonable Chelsea fan. Let's talk about this. Plan is to buy talented players. The idea is that we buy them before they are worth the 60 million plus that we used to buy them for, and either they become good enough for the first team or you flip for profit. In theory, it is foolproof. We also have a very rigid wage structure, and these talents are perfect for implementing that, as they aren't on much at all. Our contracts are heavily incentivized throughout the length of the contract. Some of the signings you can clearly tell are profit or opportunistic, and then you have the young phenom talents like Estavio, Perez, and soon Mek, who are clearly seen as the best in the world at their age, and for good reason. Oh yeah, I didn't even mention Perez either, who, like, there's so many players I can't even keep up. I don't think most Chelsea fans can. Perez, who's a kind of number 10 from Independiente from Ecuador, and they bought him when he was 16 for £17 million. Give these talents long contracts initially to amortize the fees for 7 to 8 years, then length of amortization got taken out to 5, but we still mostly give long contracts. Reason for that can be debated, probably just to hold power and I guess hope that we don't get held for ransom. This all results in a ton of players and almost every academy talent being sold as their pure profit on the books. The idea we get briefed is that this is a final window of a 4-window plan. Past this, the idea is to make less volume of investments, still have the same general strat, but just calming it down and cherry picking a bit more. Who knows if this would be the case? They've backtracked many times. How this all falls out in practice is a massive debate, but as for the idea, it's this. So that is a view of a Chelsea fan which is quite connected to the club and knows the inside out quite well. The idea of them selling their academy graduates for pure profit is of course a big talking point. As of this week, Trevor Chalobah, for example, is now being forced out of the club and, as reported, is no longer able to train with the senior team and now being trained with the under-21s, which I find despicable, really, how they are able to treat him like that, because they simply have to. Many other players are seemingly given no other option than to go. Conor Gallagher is another one of them, where they simply have to sell him because of FFP reasons, because he is seen as pure profit. Bringing in so many players, so much talent, it leaves them with no other option than to sell players that are from their academy, and it just feels like they're chasing the shiny object every time, instead of just being patient of what they already have. It's all about the flavour of the weekend. Who's the next new shiny compilation on YouTube? Like, hey, there's this young Brazilian wonder kid that is really good. Okay, well, what about the young Brazilian wonder kid that we also signed last year? Oh, wait, I forgot we had him. Sorry about that. And while I'm at it, we've also already signed another Brazilian wonder kid that is apparently better than all of the other Brazilian wonder kids that we've signed. Do you get what I mean? You've thrown away your actual academy prospects for all these shiny new toys to then replace them with more shiny new toys before you even gave the initial toy a chance. And this is a thing, some Chelsea fans are reasonable and will be agreeing, thinking, yeah, I don't really know what's happening either. But then there will be others that I see all over Twitter about, oh, you're just salty, oh, you just wish that you was us, you wish that you can get all these players. And like, look, that doesn't work on me. I'm a Burnley fan. I am not involved. I'm not a top 6 fan. I am genuinely concerned about your club. And I get it, dopamine rush of all these signings. It is like you're actually playing Football Manager. And I get the same dopamine rush when I sign all these random wonder kids too. But this is real life here. I guess from the outside looking in, my main concern is how many of these players, these academy players, are really now being given a chance to the first team. That for me is what Chelsea represented, the Cobham talents. Reece James, Gahey, Mason Mount, Hudson-Odoi, Loftus-Cheek, Billy Gilmore, Tammy Abraham, Tomori, like these players from that Lampard era. That for me is what Chelsea was meant to be. Chelsea I see as a club that brings through the talent from Cobham Academy, which is a fantastic academy, and they integrate them into the first team. That's something that's not really happening because of them spending all their money on all these other young, talented players, which kind of have to start. Enzo Fernandez, Fofana, Mudryk, Badiashile, Madueke, Caicedo, Lavia, Nkunku, Jackson, Ugochukwu. These aren't academy players. These are players going straight into the first team and are senior players. They all are expecting minutes. So what players coming through the academy can realistically get in ahead of these other talented young players that are not from the academy? There lies the issue. These young players trying to rise through, where exactly are they going to get the minutes? Ian Martin, being a great example, did fantastic at Burnley and he felt like he was ready to fight for his place. However, because Chilwell and Cucurella are ahead of him and they spent a lot of money on them, he can't get ahead. He stayed to fight for his place but only got 200 minutes in the first half of the season, so he had to go elsewhere to Dortmund and made it into a UCL final and then had to be sold to Villa because he won't get any minutes, despite, for me, deservingly so. The only new academy player the entirety of last season that even got a smidgen of minutes was the likes of a Alfie Gilchrist. And the players that it did buy to try to develop, David Washington, for example, only got 11 minutes in the league the entire season. Cassidy, that came back for the second half of the season, only got 71 minutes. Ugo Chukwu got a bit more minutes, just shy of 300. However, will we ever get ahead of Alavia or Caicedo or Fernandes? Of course, Gallagher is now gone, but is now signing another centre mid. Dewsbury Hall, of course, is now ahead of him. So realistically, my main issue is I can't see an actual route of these Cobham players getting through to the actual senior team ahead of all these other young players that also desperately needs minutes. Now, again, the idea of buying players cheap, young players cheap, develop them, sell them high, is not a new thing, obviously. And them doing this, to a few players is not an issue at all. Not an issue at all. The main issue when it comes to how much these players are initially being brought in on and the amount of players that's being brought in. When you're buying players for a couple of £1,000,000, like for example what they did with Ian Martin, was a young player at PSV Eindhoven and was brought into the academy and developed through at Cobham. The issue is most players are bringing in now that are these young players are already in the 12 to 15 to 20, 25 million pounds, which adds a lot of stress and pressure onto those players being flipped. Buying players for 2 to 5 million quid is reasonable and that's completely fine, but when you start reaching this level now, it is insanity how much they're doing this. If you don't believe me, let's have a look. Thatcher Fofana, 12 million euros. Andre Santos, 12.5 million euros. Cassidy, 14 million euros. Chukwuemeka, 18 million euros. And this was before the ownership, but Malang Sarr, who was bought for 16 million euros from Nice and then was played for a little bit, then thrown to one side, then forgotten about, and now he's off on a free transfer to RC Lens. This is how easy it is for a player to be completely forgotten about and just thrown to one side. When it comes to the entire team, it's so inexperienced with a manager that is also an inexperienced and young manager. I don't get the plan. What I noticed, and I'm sure you did last year as well with Chelsea, is that for me it looks like it is a squad of individuals trying to make themselves stand out because they literally have to, which leads to selfish behaviour. The amount of times that we saw them fighting out about penalties was embarrassing last season. Players have to be selfish because there's so much competition of young players. They are left with no other option than to be selfish, not be a team player, take an opportunity. Of the squad that went out against Real Madrid, which appears to be probably their main team for the season, it has an average age of 23.2, and that is probably boosted a lot because of Raheem Sterling. Now, of course, there is an elephant in the room here, where on the horizon there is the idea that Chelsea will be receiving either a points reduction or a transfer ban. Comes off the back of the Roman Abramovich part with him making some illegal payments. This could be part of the thinking to stock up on so many players that if that ban does come, that you have the players already in your club to develop. Issue is, it means that you can't, of course, bring in players, but you also can't let them go. So all these young players, there's so many players in the squad, they literally all can't fit in one team or even really be registered. So if you can't loan them, then what happens? And I just think, like, doing this a few times, 5, 6 times, have a bunch of young players to develop, have an academy, fine. But when they're being brought in for 15, 20, 25 million euros, and some of them barely even have played any football prior to this, it just looks like a massive risk. The idea of just buying players cheap and just flipping them for more money, in an ideal world, in theory, sounds foolproof, I agree. In theory, it's different to reality. How many of these players will actually be sold for profit? I just don't think it will work. This may be a foolproof idea. However, if Chelsea do not get Champions League football, I am seriously concerned about the world being a Chelsea football club. Chelsea will, of course, loan out some players of the current squad. There will be some players going. That all makes sense. Some players may be sold. Conor Gallagher is going to Atletico Madrid as far as we're aware. So some players for pure profit, the academy graduates, will be sold, and that should help with FFP. The idea of pure profit, I don't really think that works with most of these players that are coming in. I don't think that really counts as pure profit, because I don't think they really count as an academy graduate. And I get it for Chelsea fans why it looks very exciting. It's very attractive to have all these players, the constant dopamine rush of new signings, new young players that you can be excited about. I get why fans would defend it. I get why completely, because it's, so many young players, wonder kids. It's like playing Football Manager in real life. I get why it's exciting. However, if these players don't work out, if you cannot flip them, and if you get a transfer ban, and if you don't qualify for Champions League football again, and you've now got a manager with no experience, with players with no experience, with no actual senior heads, and a board with no experience, I just can't see it working. And I'd be love to be proved wrong, because these look like some very young, talented players, but with no figureheads, senior players to integrate them in and to help them out, I just think it's going to be a clown show with every player out for themselves and there be no team. I don't see it as a team. I don't think Chelsea are a team. I think they're individuals. And that's the way I see it. And I'm concerned. And for many Chelsea fans that I know that, are just reasonable Chelsea fans, they're extremely concerned too. Tell me your thoughts down below in the comments. I get why it's exciting. I just think it is incredibly risky. And if it works out, we'll have to find out. But tell me your thoughts down below in the comments. But this is the plan. And let's see how it works out. So, see you guys next time.